From Tel Aviv, Dan Perry, former Europe, African, and Middle East editor for the Associated Press. Dan, welcome to you. I'm anxious to get your thoughts on all of this, starting with Iran showing no signs of a willingness to negotiate or even admit that it was trying to enrich uranium. Do you foresee that changing?
Well, what they say in public is one thing, and what they really do is something else. Remember that they never really retaliated against the assassination of their Revolutionary Guard leader in 2019. They of course are going to make threats, but I think the U.S. warning that if they strike at U.S. assets, the coming retaliation against them will be much greater is not inconsequential, because the regime is already probably feeling like its survival is no longer guaranteed. And I think we see this in the targets that Israel is choosing today. I mean, they're clearly striking at symbols of the regime and practical infrastructure of the regime. The symbols, of course, of the clock that was winding down to the destruction of Israel in 2040, but also a notorious prison where they held opposition figures who are now presumably, running loose in the city, many of them. And also, of course, the building, housing, the infrastructure, and the leadership of the Revolutionary Guard's internal repression unit that was hit today. So this is not against a nuclear program. This is obviously against the regime. I think Israel's success has been so extreme that with that comes a little bit of appetite to hint at regime change. I think Israel knows, and the U.S. knows, that it's unlikely that during the war the regime will actually fall, though if it goes on long enough, all bets are off. But they are thinking that they can weaken the regime enough that opposition to it internally, which is profound, and perhaps not without some wherewithal, might endanger its existence in the coming weeks and months. So I think Iran, which is fanatical but not suicidal, might actually be bluffing and be willing to call it a day if Israel stops the strikes and then sort of lick their wounds. That's pretty obviously what Israel is hinting at when they leak all kinds of assessments, and when you see all these reports suggesting that they're not running out of targets, but they're pretty close to completing their mission. Netanyahu has somewhat delegitimized his own decision-making process by blundering into a forever war in Gaza that's very unpopular in Israel. I think he knows that cannot happen with Iran, and I think they're going to try to find an endgame in a couple of days, perhaps. Remember Tel Aviv, and I think we're seeing it on the screen here. Tel Aviv is a first world city full of 50-story office towers. It's one of the wealthier places in the European periphery. I don't know of a case in history where a city like this has come under ballistic missile attack that's sustained. This is not something they want to see continue. On the other hand, if we're talking about firsts, I can't think of another case where the United States has joined Israel in an attack on one of its enemies. The U.S. has helped Israel defend, but this is quite unprecedented. And I think Israel's enemies around the region, and very definitely Iran, are taking note of that. It is a statement that goes well beyond the practical and even beyond the symbolic. It's a strategic realignment.
Yeah. Well, and in response to that, you have Russia's President Vladimir Putin meeting with Iran's foreign minister. That also seems unprecedented. What is the concern? Because a lot of people will go, we don't want them teaming up. If Iran is in fact licking its wounds and feeling diminished, who do they turn to for support in their next move?
It's almost hard to conceive of Putin being some sort of peacemaker and playing a positive role in the world. It seems farcical, the very notion of it. But who knows? Maybe Putin can talk Iran off the ledge. I don't think Putin wants a prolonged war, and he probably wants to help the regime save itself, because the regime is one of his few allies in the world, and the regime has been critical to providing his war machine with drones and other things. So my guess is he's trying to get Iran to accept whatever half reasonable terms the U.S. and Israel may be willing to offer.
Do you think that he's working more as a mediator? He also condemned the U.S. attacks.
Well, again, what people say in public during a war, sure he condemned the U.S. attacks. There's nothing else he can say given his position. But I look at his interests. Putin although he, in my opinion, blundered very badly in Ukraine. I think is currently most likely doing a risk assessment that he wants uh, this war in Iran to be over because it endangers the existence of the regime without a shadow of a doubt. And we see the Iranian opposition already mobilizing. There was an interesting news conference today by Reza Pahlavi, the son of the former Shah, who has sort of got all these groups behind him in this with this idea not to restore the type of dictatorship that his father ran, but to transition into an Iran that is democratic. And I interviewed him a year ago, or less, a few months ago, and he was quite convincing to me in his vision of an Iran that can be modern and democratic, respectful of its traditions, but at peace with Israel, and essentially embracing the democratic alliance of the West.
A glimmer of hope for peace and a way out of this to avoid any further bloodshed. Dan Perry, thank you as always.